I'm super excited to have three amazing women with me this morning to share their story about their career, how they got to the top, any tips that they have for us all to get there with them so it doesn't feel as lonely. And I want to let them introduce themselves so they can speak with their own voice rather than me putting a bio together. I'm going to start with Amy.
I knew I shouldn't have taken this. But I match, so I get extra credit, unwittingly. My name is Amy Foley. I'm the Vice President of Product Innovation and Delivery for Johnson & Johnson. My role in J&J is pretty diverse from the perspective of I focus on health and well-being in our digital solutions across the spectrum of care, from sick care to well care, from the beginning of time to the end of life. So some pretty exciting solutions based on behavior change.
Mandy?
And I'm Mandy Mock. I'm at Intel. I'm the Vice President and General Manager of our Product Engineering Solutions Group in IT, as well as our Corporate Director of Accessibility. So that means my role is twofold. The first is really working with our product development teams for how we do product development, the methodologies, the tools, how we speed up our time to market, and so forth. And then the second for accessibility is around how do we make not only our corporate environment accessible to people of diverse abilities, but also how do we make our products accessible to more people in the market.
And I'm Barbara Nelson, and I'm VP and General Manager of the Cloud Software and Services Group at Western Digital. And my role is really transforming what's largely a hardware company in the consumer space into the cloud and into software, and doing a lot of things really innovative relative to how you use your data and what you can do with it and how it can be exciting. So that's me.
I'm going to start with Mandy just because I'm a consumer tech analyst and I deal with pretty much all the vendors that are in tech. And even as an analyst, it's a pretty lonely affair. And I never feel more lonely than when I go to a semiconductor company where most of the engineers are men. And if I look around, I feel young and definitely female. So it's always refreshing to me when I actually, over the past couple of years, I've seen more and more women stepping up at Intel from a management perspective and having more of a voice. I have a question. Do you think that women lead differently, or are we all the same?
It's a great question, Carolina, and one that's really interesting. You know, Intel has been making a strong diversity push over the last several years, and so actually it's been getting better and better. I no longer feel like I'm the only person the only woman in the room most of the time. And in fact, I work for a woman now, which is a great thing for me. Now, when I look at the leadership styles, I don't think you can separate it into men lead like this and women lead like this. I see really a bell curve, if you will, over both men and women. And for me, I try to focus more on the individual. What is their style and how does that mesh with my style? Because I do find that it's really important that you click with your manager, that you have the ability to talk together, that you get their support, that you feel comfortable raising issues with them and so forth. And that's just different depending on the person. So that's what I tend to focus on more versus men or women.
Can I put Barbara on the spot for a second?
Okay.
You've been in fields that are very men-dominated. Security.
Semiconductors.
Yes,
storage,
security,
yeah.
storage,
Right.
absolutely.
Exactly.
Can you tell me, over the years, and you've been CEO, so you've been, you had the power to run your company as you wished, and look at diversity as a priority. In the company where you work now, what is it that they're getting right and what you wish they would do more of?
Okay, so I work for Western Digital, and they get a lot of things right when it comes to diversity. The first thing is there's a tremendous emphasis on it. So there's, employee resource groups, affinity groups, all kinds of things like that. The second thing is that it's very much a culture that is highly collaborative. So one of the things I think, again, back to your bell curves, I think one of the things that if you put women in a bell curve and men in a bell curve, the classic difference that people talk about, I think has some reality to it, which is women do better in a collaborative culture and have a collaborative leadership style, and that is totally supported at Western Digital. That's kind of the way we do things. The third thing is just, I work on a staff. I work for a guy who has a $4 billion business. He has 7 direct reports. 3 of us are women. So, that's important as well. What I would like to see more of is more of us at the top, which is true across all of tech. So.
Yeah, I think we get very excited when the numbers grow, and we're looking at that bigger number. But when you look at management, those numbers are still very, very small. And it seems that, the focus is so much on just get the overarching number up that we don't even want to aspire to have more managers, which is absolutely what we should do. Can I get a little personal as we're sitting close together?
I don't know, is that my release form?
And everybody's here, so it's a little...
Sure, go ahead.
You made a major decision after 20 years being with the company to leave the company and go and join Johnson & Johnson.
Yes.
Things are clearly going well for you there. In 2017, I believe you were awarded the Working Mother of the Year. More power to you. Absolutely. Was that your best career decision you ever made? And if not, which one was it?
Sure. It was probably the hardest that I made for a lot of reasons. And very grateful to be at J&J, who, like Western Digital, as you outlined, is super supportive. We're really lucky to have 46% of our employees are women at all levels. So,
yay!
Wow!
Yay! And in 130-ish years, 132 years, having, we actually hired the first female scientist. So really blessed to be in an environment, especially where we focus on women in STEM heavily through programs. So, but going to J&J after a very rich career in healthcare was a really difficult decision. I had been able to do a lot of great things. I had my children in that environment. I had worked without children in that environment, and I had the opportunity to really change the course of healthcare in the pharmacy space. When I went to J&J, obviously phenomenal company, great reputation, but it was really a difficult decision for me to say, am I ready to go? Do I really want another job that looks like this? Everybody gets to a career point in life where you're like, is it time to basket weave? So it was a difficult decision, and I think the best decision I made, somewhat naively, was a long time ago. And as I look out across the room, I see everybody who's hopefully in multiple different stages of their careers. But early on, I started as a journalist, and I went into corporate, sold out and went corporate, according to my media friends. But when I did that, I started in employee communications and media relations, and the internet wasn't a thing. So for those of you who are younger than me, probably everybody in the room, it wasn't a thing. So when it became a thing, it was something I was really interested in, and so very naively, but sort of instinctively, I decided to leave the organization I was at to look for a company who was committed to technology, and not just technology for technology's sake, but technology to change the trajectory of what we're doing in healthcare. And so that was a really risky decision for me. I don't know that I can tell you that I made it with all the facts in front of me, because I was pretty early in my career, but it turned out to be the best decision. And ultimately, being at Johnson & Johnson has enabled me to really mesh my what's important to me as a human, which I think Mandy mentioned about treating people as individuals, and it's really important that we bring all of that to bear. And I think that being able to be who I want to be both personally and professionally is possible.
Yeah, and I think with the next generation, there's less about balancing work and life and more blending, right?
Yes.
Because that's what people want to do. I don't want to juggle. I just want to be in the moment and enjoy that moment going forward. And especially important for women because of family duties that we have as well.
Absolutely.
When it comes to management as a woman, and Mandy, I'm coming back to you for this management question. How do you get comfortable and confident in your role? How do you lead with confidence?
That's a great question, Carolina, because I think for us in particular as women, confidence does tend to be an issue. I see many women, and I experienced myself, that it takes a while to get confident. And what really made the difference for me was having a range of different experiences. So in particular, a pivotal moment was I took a rotation, a 4-month rotation into a different group. My manager had come to me and said, hey, you really need to increase your visibility inside of IT. You need to get more exposure to different teams and to our leadership. And so I took this 4-month coverage for another woman who had gone on maternity leave into our client services team. So this is the group that supports PCs and printers and so forth. Now, frankly, I didn't really have any experience in that domain. So personally, it felt like a very big risk to go over there and take on that rotation. But at the same time, I did have capabilities to add leadership and vision and goal setting and structure. And so I went ahead and did it. And at the back of my mind, I have to say, I was thinking, how bad can I screw it up in 4 months, right? It's kind of a mitigated risk, helped with that. And it turned out to be great. It was a wonderful learning experience. I felt like I really stretched, and I walked out of that much more confident about my ability to move into different sets of circumstances and to be able to add value to a team. I didn't have to be the expert in that domain. I had things to offer in management and leadership, and the team was full of experts. And that then set me up for my next career move, was a rotation into a completely different group in IT, supporting the financial systems, so SAP and these big enterprise systems that, again, I didn't really have much experience with. And I don't think I would have had the confidence to make that move if I hadn't done the rotation first. But gradually, those set of experiences grow over time. And as you try, one step further, okay, let's try this one a little more different. Let's try this one a little more different. Your confidence just grows and grows. And you start to feel like, I think I could go into pretty much any situation and I'd be able to figure something out and draw on the team and add value to it.
Yeah, I think that our obsession with sometimes doing it all and having it all brings us to work as well, where we think that we need on our own be able to do everything that our job entails, when it's about finding the right people in your team, having a support system, and so forth. Barbara, over the years in your extensive career, what was the best advice you got from a man, and what was the best advice from a woman?
Okay, so I don't do well with bests, but I'll give you a couple good ones.
A good one.
So I think for me, the best advice from a man, and these things I think are pretty personal. It's stuff that matters to me personally. I'm not sure it matters to everybody, but I was told by a guy that was a very difficult boss who gave me a lot of trouble on a lot of things, and was constantly pushing and never, kind of, what have you done for me lately? That kind of person. He in a surprise moment said to me, Barbara, always trust your instincts. Your instincts are really good. And and I think back to confidence. Yeah. Sometimes we don't do that. Sometimes we think, oh, I need more information, or I need to, talk to this person, that person. Usually we really know what the right thing is to do, and we just need to get people behind us and champions to go do it. So first thing was trust your instincts. And from a woman, I would say the story here is I'm an Army brat, so I've lived in a lot of different places. And when I was a kid, we lived in Ottawa, Canada. And the big deal when you live in Canada, at least in Ottawa, which snows all the time, is building these snow forts. And so me and a buddy of mine, we had built, and at Christmas time, you get the trees, so you have the ice and the snow and the trees. And so you got these fabulous forts. And we had built this great fort, and a bunch of bullies in the neighborhood came and tore it all down and took our trees. And I was really pissed. And I'm 7 years. And I'm sitting on the snowbank, 7 years old, crying my eyes out, which your tears freeze pretty quickly in Canada. And I can still feel the scarf around me with, the wet wool. And I was just so pissed. And I go in the house screaming and I go to my mother, and my mother said, "What's wrong?" And I told her the story, and she said, and I said, "You need to go do something." And my mother said, "Fight your own battles." And I think that's not to say that we don't get help, not to say that we don't have sponsors and advocates and champions that help us along the way, but you have to start with fighting your own battles. And that was from my mother.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can relate to that. I tell my 10-year-old all the time, no, I'm not going to call your friend's mom to make you
exactly.
So you can talk to her. Amy, in your career, did you have any roadblocks because of your gender? And if so, how did you overcome those?
Sure. I've always had a difficult time answering this question because, I was raised, sort of no gender bias. I had to go chop wood and shovel the driveway just like my brother. So, that was convenient, I think. I don't think it was like leading edge necessarily. But I sort of was raised that, if you knew what you were doing and you worked hard, it didn't matter. And so it took me a long time to really come up against situations that fit how you described that. And when I did, I think it was really twice as shocking for me because I just didn't believe that was the case. And I think that the hardest one for me was in a prior role in a different organization when I was relatively far along in my career before I decided to have children. And that was not viewed positively. That was viewed as a lack of commitment from me and changed the relationship that I had with some pretty important people in that organization. And I'm grateful for that happening, as weird as that sounds, because it really taught me what probably other people who love you will tell you in your lives, that the most important things are the people and the family and those that you care about, not necessarily how many emails we process on a given day or how many meetings we go to or everything else that happens, because at the end of time, that's not what it reads on your epitaph. What it reads is who you are and what you do. And so my children were both very premature. So I was at work and left and literally had my daughter very, very quickly. And it was at that moment that I realized, when the situation had turned, how I had to reevaluate, what was really important to me. And so people say that. People say, when I had kids, when I got the dog, when, when I, got married, or when I found my significant other, or whatever. But it takes that moment when you realize that you need to be there for yourself. So that you can really bring that. And I think if you're not in an organization, or you're in an organization but you're doing it to yourself, because a lot of us do this.
Yes.
When you find yourself in a situation where you're not bringing all of you, you were hired, my guess is, if you're working in the right organization, you were hired for all of you, for the experiences that you have, for the fortitude you had in building a snow fort, right? And so we don't want to take that out of you. We want to make sure we bring that.
Yeah. It's interesting about children, because I think that not only companies have expectations, but even your colleagues. Is there, I'm going to Mandy for this, is there an expectation at Intel when women have children that things will change? I remember a female colleague telling me when I said I was pregnant, "Oh, you're not going to work as hard afterwards." And I was like, why?
I don't really think there is. I think the expectation remains let's say the work expectation remains the same in terms of, Intel's very focused on results. So you're familiar.
It hasn't changed in many years.
It really hasn't changed. We call it a meritocracy. So the idea is you work hard, you're rewarded for the results you get. It's not about the hours that you put in or what exact times you're there or so forth. It's about the results. And so that's a really good environment actually for being flexible in. But at the same time, what I see is many of us struggle with feeling guilty for when we need to leave to take care of our kids or our families or something that's going on in our private life. You know, we tend to, and I'm guilty of this too, we tend to feel like, oh, what will people think if I left at 3 o'clock, you know, not realizing that I got up at 5 that morning to make up for it, right? So the way that I deal with that is I try to create boundaries, I guess, through both clear expectations. So I'll try to communicate with my colleagues about, you know, what hours I'm available and what hours I'm not available. For example, when my kids were small, it was really important to me to be able to take from 5 to 7 to have with my kids because that's when they were awake and they were having dinner and so forth, right? And I was fine having meetings after that or early morning meetings, fine, but 5 to 7 was sacred to me. So I just blocked that in my calendar every single day. And it didn't mean that I wouldn't take a meeting if it was urgent or, you know, something really came up, but it just meant that it wasn't every day that I was making that decision because somebody had randomly dropped a 6 o'clock meeting on my calendar. You know, so that sort of structure I think really helps with that.
Yeah, and I agree with you that sometimes we bring it on ourselves, right? Yeah. I remember sitting on a plane. It was the first trip I took after my daughter was born. And I was chatting with this lady who I just met sitting next to me. And I was sharing my anxiety of leaving at 4 o'clock to spend time with my newborn. And she looked at me and she said, do you have male colleagues who go to the gym or go play golf at 5? And I said, yeah. Do they feel guilty? I was like, I don't think so. Why should you?
Exactly.
And that was like, you're so right, you know. But it takes you a second to think that way. So I want to make sure that I open it up for questions as we have a few minutes left. But before I do that, I have 2 questions for all of you. One is it lonely at the top? Granted, we need more, right? We need more of us. But is it lonely, or you feel that you have enough of a support system, that you have champions and things are starting to turn?
So I think it can be very lonely at the top. It can be lonely at the bottom.
Yes.
In the middle and everywhere in between. I think that if you're, and this is going to sound, you know, a little bit trite, but I think if what you're focused on is getting to the top, then it's going to be incredibly lonely. Yeah. Because the things that make you a great human being, both in the office and outside of the office, and make you a great leader, I think are being able to understand, be open, and be receptive, and learn from everybody around you, which is what my colleagues have been saying as well in different ways. And so if you do that and you stay connected, and you create a network without, you know, sort of the formal, let me tick off and create a network, right? But you learn and you create that, then I think that it doesn't have to be lonely at the top. There are always decisions that people need to make, who are in charge of a lot of things, right, that alienate us from others because we have things that we need to take care of, and there's always things that nobody tells me because, you know, they're not comfortable telling me and I have to find out from somebody else. But I think that if you stay focused on that, that's the best way to prevent that.
Mandy? Yeah, that's a great answer. And I very much identify with that. You know, for me, people relationships are very important. At the end of the day, I don't think much of anything gets done through hierarchies. It's not because I go to my team and say, do this, that stuff's going to happen. It's because I have personal relationships with people. And so therefore, when I call somebody up and say, hey, I need some help, you know, they're likely to respond, and vice versa, I'm likely to respond to them. So I try to focus a lot on that versus position in the organization or who somebody is or so forth. And I think that network of relationships serves me well, both in terms of connecting with people and getting the work done.
Barbara? So, you know, a lot of people will say it's lonely at the top, particularly if you're CEO. That's always, oh, you know, it's. And I was really I was prepared, you know, and I, you know, was in the job for a couple months, and I was talking to another friend who was a CEO, and I said to her, you know, so what's the lonely? Are you lonely at the top? And she said, no. What's up with that? And I think you all said it. It's you can be lonely anywhere in the organization, and it depends on the organization you pick and the people that you pick. So it's not just reaching out to people; it's also picking your molecule, your people, which can be your the company that you work in, the colleagues that you connect with. I always had a friendly board member. As a CEO, that I could, you know, tell them everything, and it was okay. And you know, so I think you cultivate those relationships. Exactly what you were saying. You cultivate relationships, both people working for you, with you, above you, such that that's what makes you a good leader, and that also why it's for me has never been lonely.
So I have a 10-year-old, and she obviously doesn't listen to me. So if there's one piece of advice that you can give her to be successful in whatever career at the moment is going from farming to being a vet, so we'll see what happens, what would be that piece of advice?
Well, my first advice would be buckle up to you. Yes. I have a 15-year-old daughter, so enjoy it.
Thank you.
It's great. It's awesome.
I'm full with confidence now.
Wow, advice. Mine doesn't listen to me either, so you can call mine and I'll call yours, and then something. But no, I think
that sounds like a plan.
I think it's hard when they're young because they're trying to figure out who they are, right? And you want to tell them what to do, and that's just not going to work. So they have to learn, just like we all had to learn, right?
Yes.
And sometimes that's painful for them, and sometimes it's painful for you. But I think being authentic to yourself, I think, you know, I have a son and a daughter, so I've seen two totally different personalities, two totally different genders, just totally different humans. But I will say that I have seen with my daughter differently than with my son. You know, when she was young, you know, I have this great picture of her when she was 3.5 with a softball mitt and a princess dress. And she was like, I am it. Like, you know, and there is nothing that can stop me. And I watch what we do to one another, and how insecure that age is, you know, as they go preteen into teen. And so I would say be authentic to yourself, and, you know, let's end the whole imposter syndrome thing. You know, let's lift each other up, and, you know, and kind of believe in yourself, because this is the time at this age where they don't believe in themselves. And a lot of that is because we do it to one another.
Yeah.
That's so true. I see that as well. I have a 12-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son, and especially with my 12-year-old daughter, I can see that very much. If I were to build on that advice, I think what I would say is to tell your daughter to ask for what she wants. You know, I think often we don't tend to ask. We're scared of why will I ask? What if somebody says no? And for me, I learned that lesson when I first joined Intel. So I joined Intel right out of school, and they flew me out to Santa Clara. Here at the office is not very far from here. And it was a great interview. I really liked the company. I was super impressed with the thought that I might be able to contribute to microprocessors. I mean, how exciting is that, right? And I had brought he's my husband now, but he was my fiance at the time. I'd brought him with me. And so after the interview, we're driving around the area looking at houses and just thinking about what would it be like to live here. And keep in mind, this is 23 years ago, but we're pulling up basically in front of these shacks that are multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, and just going, oh my God, there's no way. And, you know, we flew back home, and I screwed up my courage, and I called Intel and said, do you have any other sites? And it sounds like a really simple question, but frankly, it was so hard to do. I mean, it just seemed like, you know, this is Intel, and, you know, they're gonna be offended that, who am I, this lowly college graduate, to ask them this? But they weren't at all. They were so accommodating. They were just instantly like, yes, of course, we're gonna fly you to Oregon. Let's try that out and see how you like it. And that's where I ended up. But it really cemented in my mind, you know, how much we let these doubts and insecurities, to your point, Amy, build up and let them stop us from asking for what we want. And at the end of the day, people are usually so accommodating. And honestly, what's the worst they're going to say? No.
No.
Well, you already had that in your pocket, right? Yeah. So ask.
You know, I go back and forth, especially the age, 10 years old. You know, I would say, building on this, to believe in yourself, and to believe in what you can and who you are. You know, your own authenticity, your own purpose, and to believe in yourself. The other thing I think I would say is to care. You know, whatever you do, care about the people that you're with, care about your job, care about the stranger on the street, care about the grocery clerk, care. And it's amazing to me if you just do that. The power of that is amazing. And it's a skill that's important in a personal life and your professional life, just as a person. It's one of those, you know, those lifetime skills that are really important. So I would say care.
Which
So
builds on
much
your whole
wisdom.
comments about the relationships,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And not being lonely at the top. If you do that, then
That's right.
that all comes together.
Yeah.
Questions in the room? We have time for a couple of questions. Looking at, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Are there mics?
There's one right behind you guys.
I don't need a mic, I have a really loud voice.
Okay.
So, by the way, welcome.
They want to pick it up on the video. Yeah.
So first of all, you guys with the 15 and 12-year-olds, buckle up. I have 16 and a half-year-old twins. So trust me. But, you know, we think about how we grew up, and now we're seeing these kids who are, you know, becoming very political and, you know, putting themselves out there and making their voices heard. What kind of advice would you give them about, you know, when they're embracing their work life and their activism?
Oh, interesting question.
Well, I can make a go at that. I have my 15-year-old. It was very interesting. He was in 8th grade during the Trump election, and so they were studying civics and the whole election process. And we won't go political here, but he was asking a lot of questions about what was happening.
My daughter too.
You know, how everything worked. And what I've encouraged him to do is just try to keep an open mind, understand that there's many different perspectives out there, and that's going to happen in the workplace, it's going to happen in politics, and you have to be focused on encouraging the conversation.
Yes.
And, you know, sharing
Absolutely.
the perspectives and ideas instead of getting so entrenched into views at either extreme. I have a joke with him that we're going to start a new political party. We're going to call it the Reasonable People Party. It's all going to be about compromise.
I want to join that party.
With time, one more question.
Somebody else here? Yeah.
Do you want to go up to the mic right behind you?
So my question is a little bit of a follow-up on what you said earlier about the advice for a 10-year-old. You said something like be authentic to yourself, believe in yourself, ask the question and all that. But the hardest job is to convince 8 or a 10-year-old to do that. So what advice you would give to the parents to convince the kids to go that path? Because I think that's the bigger problem.
I think it depends on the day, the time, the position of the sun and the moon. And if I had a recipe, I'd be writing a different book. No, I think, you know, for my daughter, we are very different, but we are super similar about a lot of things. And so we're like this a lot.
Yeah.
I need to step back. And I think some of the advice that came from my colleagues here is important at home as well. And I really do try to hear her because if she has and can articulate a reason, even if I don't think that reason is, you know, right based on umpteen more years experience. If she's able to talk her way through it, what I see with her is then she feels like she's being heard and respected, and she has that opportunity to sort of work through the problem, and I'm able to kind of react to it less emotionally. Where we have issues is when, you know, she says, I'm going to step in traffic, and I say, no, you're not. They're not as blunt as that, but that tends to work because I think that they're fighting so hard to figure out who they are, and if you put it in context, if we have an idea and we bring that forward in the office and people just shut it down immediately, that doesn't really make us feel good.
I agree. The importance of giving an answer when they ask you a question and not dismissing, as silly as the question might be, to us, I think is very important because it matters to them. And I think if you shut them down so early, they stop asking the questions, and I think that remains with them. So I
another
totally
thing
agree.
that you were saying about your career that I think also works for children. I don't have children, so easy for me to say, but this happened to me as a child, which is, let them do. Give them stuff to go off and do that they want to do, that they're passionate about. And I wanted to be a concert pianist. Didn't work out so well.
Do you play though?
I do play, and I play in a rock band, but rock is a whole lot easier than Brahms. And anyway, my mother and dad sent me off to a music camp at the University of Illinois when I was 13, and I learned a ton about myself in confidence, and that gave me a tremendous sense of confidence, and it gave me confidence in making decisions. One of which was, I'm not going to be a concert pianist. This is not my cup of tea. And I made that decision on my own, as opposed to my mother and father saying, that's not going to work. So I think, find out what their passions are, let them go with it, and explore and find out those things. That will develop confidence, and they'll try on a bunch of things before they kind of figure out who they are, and they'll try on a lot of things before they'll settle in on something. So.
I'm not going to let you talk to my daughter. She wants a set of drums. I don't know. So.
You can get drums with headphones, and they're all electronic. You can actually do that.
If I can add just one more thing,
Yeah.
I wanted to build. I love this thought, but I wanted to build as well on what you both said about really listening to kids. I'm a reader, so I always love books. If you guys are readers as well, there's a great book called How to Talk So Your Kids Listen, and Listen
Yes.
So Your Kids Talk, and there's a teenage version of it as well as one that's for younger kids. It was very
need to
impactful
step up to the
me.
teenager.
I still try to practice the techniques, but it's very much along the lines of what you're saying about really hearing what they're saying and getting them to come out and express. Helped a lot.
Well, we're
Excuse me.
out of time. Oh,
Could I jump in with one more question? You can't say no.
no, I was just being told yes, so please go ahead.
I would just like to, we all know about the Boys Network. And I'd like to get your experience associated with how supportive women are in the workplace. I've had a long career, and unfortunately from time to time, I've found that some women have viewed more women in the workplace as a threat versus an opportunity. I'd like us to see all of us support each other in furthering career, and I'm wondering what your experience is in this regard and any advice you can give us.
Sure. I mean, I think we've probably all experienced that. I don't know that they're always gender-based, right? I mean, for me, the ones that have been worse have not been gender-based. They've been, either associated, everybody's over here doing this one thing, or whatever the case may be. But again, I think a lot of times we tell ourselves stories about why we're not successful, and so it's really about the relationships, and if people are getting together and they're building relationships in a way, doing something that you don't do, whether it's golf or it's bunco or it's talking about their kids and you don't have any, whatever that is, if that's something that you need to be successful in your organization to create those relationships, then you have to figure out how to create those relationships. I have been in environments where inclusive sort of groups have kept me from doing something that I wanted to do in the speed or the way in which I've done it, but I've never been anywhere that I couldn't break through that once I really understood what was going on.
Yeah, sometimes it's understanding how they
and
work.
so sometimes you hit the wall and you're like, why is no one saying yes? Why is no one saying yes? And then you step back and you say, they're all looking at each other. Why are they looking at each other? And so, I think sometimes it takes figuring that out, but I think if we don't do that, then we're really like, we're authorizing those things to happen.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say.
That's good. I think also I would bring us back to what I was saying before about asking for what you want. There's some really interesting research out there that says when men and women look at a job opportunity, they tend to look at it differently.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you're a woman, you'll look at the 10 job requirements and you say, I only have 3, I'm really not qualified. Or sorry, I only have 9, I'm really not qualified for the job. And if you're a guy, you look at it and you say, I only have 3, I'm totally qualified. And so there's some element too of we have to really push ourselves to go out there and ask again for the opportunities, ask to break into the club, ask for the job, even if it's not posted or officially listed out there. We've got to be pushing ourselves for that.
Yeah. I also think there's situations that certain companies just don't have a problem with this. I'm very fortunate to have worked with many of them, including Western Digital. But I think there are places where you get into this mode where, okay, we need one woman, we've got our one woman, we're done. Check.
Yes.
And I worked years ago in a government environment like that, and what I found about that environment is it's very stagnant. There's not a lot of growth, and that one woman is going to hang on to her job because she knows she's the one, and don't expect her to be supportive because if she gets knocked, if you get in, she gets knocked out. So I think a lot of that has changed, but there's still places where that exists. And my advice is don't go there, don't work there. Go work someplace else where you don't have those problems because you're not going to change that. And it's real. And I think for me, most of the boy networks have been more politics, tribal things that go on that are male and female. This tribe over here versus this tribe over there, and you end up in the wrong tribe, and they have bigger guns, and
No pun intended.
That's not a good thing. So I, in my experience, I have found more situations where it's been not gender-based, it's been politically based, political meaning coalitions of people inside of a company. And, but I do think that if you're in an environment where you've got that tokenism that's going on, get the hell out.
Mm-hmm. Well, please join me to say thank you very much to our lovely leaders. Thank you, very inspiring, a lot of information and tips, especially for teenagers. Thank you all. I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.